Joining us today from Catawba College, Dr. Michael Bitzer, professor of politics, and literally the guy who is writing the book on all this, on redistricting here in North Carolina, coming out soon. Professor, thanks as always. We appreciate it.
My pleasure to be with you.
All right, so redistricting, it happens every 10 years. Then there's always lawsuits. This year, state lawmakers are promising, after all the lawsuits in recent years, they're promising the most transparent process ever. Do we think that's going to happen?
It's always talked about that, but in my research, I've always found that the maps have been drawn well before they are publicly released. I can't say whether that's going to be the case yet again, but we just have to go back 10 years to see the work and the influence of Thomas Hofeller, who had basically drawn the maps for the Republicans when they took over in 2011, to say that all of these maps are typically drawn behind closed doors and then are released to the public. We'll just have to wait and see if that level of transparency, like what we saw in 2019 with the maps literally being drawn on computers that people could live stream, will play out this time, and how much influence will a potential court have on if any future redistricting initiatives need to be taken in this decade.
And you've referenced 2019. A judge basically came back and sort of instructed lawmakers how they needed to do this. Do they have to abide by those same rules this time around?
Well, it wasn't necessarily appealed up to the North Carolina State Supreme Court, so I would not consider it precedent. I would consider it probably a warning shot to the Republicans to say, if you are going to engage in this type of partisan gerrymandering that we expect to happen, then these are the circumstances and the conditions that might get you out from real intense scrutiny. I think we'll just have to wait and see.
Why is this something that we're still struggling with?
Because it is the most political activity in America. I studied under Charles Bullock at the University of Georgia, and he has literally written the book on the history of redistricting in the country, what it is, how it developed, and it's been with us since the dawn of the Republic. So this is embodied in our politics. Whenever you draw the rules and the lines of districts, you can favor one group over another. And that's what gerrymandering is. It has taken on partisan bent. Here in North Carolina, we have seen decades of racial gerrymandering questions go on. So this is just a part of our body politic. This is part of the soul of American politics that is indeed the most partisan dynamic. And I don't think it's ever going to go away. Just because you draw the lines doesn't necessarily mean that you're taking politics out by giving it over to somebody else who could be nonpartisan. We, the voters, have sorted ourselves in the research that I've done, and it's just as hard to try and draw these competitive lines as it is to draw a partisan type of district.
How do you describe this process in your classes? I mean, you hear gerrymandering and redistricting, and folks' eyes sort of glaze over, despite the fact that it's, as you mentioned, so influential and so important. How do you describe it?
I basically sum up redistricting as you have to apportion members of a legislature to geographic regions. And once you do that, you start to consolidate people into legislative districts, and those people have voting patterns. They have voting behavior. And so certainly if you're trying to devise a districting system where the lines are fair, we talk about this idea of fairness in American politics. It's really hard nowadays to get that level of fairness when over 70% of North Carolina's precincts voted overwhelmingly for one party over the other in 2020. That's just hard to start to use those building blocks of precincts to then create the districts. So the districts are drawn, they have to allot a member, a legislator, state house representative, state senator, member of Congress to these districts. And that's really where the dynamics of partisanship really come into play, I say.
Give us an idea when they start sort of settling on these new maps. what are the criteria they're supposed to follow?
Well, first and foremost, they're supposed to follow the notion of one person, one vote, equal population. At the congressional level, all of the congressional districts have to be within basically one person, equal in population to every other district. When you get into the state legislative districts and a little more at the city council district level, you can have some variation. Generally, the Supreme Court of the United States has said 5% over or under is an acceptable allocation of population to those districts. So there's some range there. But then you get into issues like compactness. How compact are these districts? Do they spread all over the state, like the infamous I-85 12th Congressional District that this area is well known for? You can't break districts into two. They have to always be connected. And so there are some basic rules that the state Republicans in the legislature have already put out and said this is going to guide our criteria. Charlotte City Council has those same kind of criteria, but again, partisanship will be part of this, and also the protection of incumbents potentially.
Is there a perfect case scenario in how redistricting is handled fairly?
You know, a lot of people point to the state of Iowa that has a nonpartisan independent redistricting commission. A lot of states are moving towards that kind of ideal, but part of it is, yes, you can draw the lines blindly. You can put them together. You can create these districts, but the behavior on the ground, the behavior of voters that make up those districts are naturally going to tilt the districts one way or the other. And because we are so polarized now, because people have sorted themselves into like-minded communities, it's hard to create a map.
All right, summed up quite well. All right, Professor of Politics, Dr. Michael Bitzer, also author of a new book. Congrats on the new book, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, more Flashpoint after this.